If you can imagine what it might be like to be in a bad car accident where you've hit your head really badly on impact, that's what getting ME is like. One day you're fine, the next everything is suddenly completely different. Your brain works in a completely different way to how it used to, and so does your heart and just about every other part of your body as well. Your entire life and your entire brain and body are just instantly changed forever. I suddenly got all sorts of weird neurological symptoms, everything from blackouts to seizures, episodes of paralysis, and losing my sense of balance in the dark. I also suddenly got a lot of cognitive problems. I haven't been able to think a single normal thought in the way I used to before the day everything changed and I became ill. I have a lot of problems with my memory as well, and not things like losing my car keys, that sort of normal stuff. Sometimes I forget how to talk. Sometimes I can't understand speech anymore. Sometimes I am unable to read or write at all. Sometimes I can't recognise the faces of close family members. Sometimes I can't remember how to even walk. More than anything, ME is a neurological illness. A specific type of damage to the brain is what ME is. It's caused by a virus though, not a car crash, obviously. The other thing that really defines ME, aside from damage to the brain, is that at the same time that your whole brain is changed, so is the level of activity that your body can cope with, and the way that your heart works as well. I went from being a normal, healthy, active 19-year-old one day to being able to do only about 40% as active as I used to be the day I became ill. One of the main reasons for that is because ME causes a type of cardiac insufficiency. Your heart just doesn't pump like it used to. It doesn't function well enough for people with ME to be anything like as active as we used to be. You can't be more active than your heart can cope with, or else death occurs. You can't cross that boundary. So people with ME are forced to be very careful and limited with how active they are just to stay alive. The limits with activity levels that people with ME have don't just apply to physical activity either. We're also limited in the same way with being mentally active, with thinking, and also with orthostatic or postural stress, which just means being upright, sitting or standing. We also have to limit that quite severely. All of these different activities, if you do them beyond your body's individual limits once you're ill, just make the cardiac insufficiency worse. In the short term, that means you end up with all sorts of different symptoms being made worse and more severe. You know, you might end up with suddenly having a lot of trouble breathing, or you might end up with, having a 6-hour-long cardiac episode that feels like a heart attack, or you might end up having a blackout, or you might find that all your symptoms are made worse. That's what happens in the short term. But in the long term, if you keep doing more than your body can cope with, if you keep pushing yourself past your limits, you can end up making yourself ill permanently. You make yourself permanently more ill and more disabled. You can do yourself bodily damage. That's what happened to me. I started out being able to do only 40% of what I used to when I was first ill, on the advice of my doctor at the time, who had misdiagnosed me and who knew nothing about ME or the difference between ME and CFS. I kept pushing myself right up to my limits for years. It was the stupidest advice I could ever have been given, and the stupidest thing to do. For the last 6 years, I've been reduced to only being able to do far below even 5% of my pre-illness ability levels or activity levels, because of that. It could be worse. People with ME have died from this sort of advice to be more active or to exercise, but more than 10 years later, I'm still paying for bad medical advice. So the main problems caused by ME are neurological and cognitive problems, cardiac and cardiovascular problems, and the limits on how active you can be. But because of the way that the brain is damaged, the central nervous system, which controls all sorts of bodily functions, and the way the heart is affected, you also end up with just so many other different symptoms from all sorts of bodily systems. There are well over even 60 different symptoms of ME. Some of them are stable. Some wax and wane throughout the hour, throughout the day, throughout the week and month, fairly randomly. You don't know what you're going to get from 1 hour or one day to the next. And others are made a lot worse by overexertion, either physical, mental or orthostatic. Even really low levels of overactivity can just make you ridiculously more ill for days, weeks or even months afterwards.